It's August 2020, and it is 4:00 p.m. With that, I call this executive committee meeting of the Community Oversight Board to order. Let's begin first and foremost by reading the appeals decision pursuant to the provisions of section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws. Please take notice that decisions of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County Community Oversight Board may be appealed to the Chancery Court of Davidson County for review under a common law writ of cert. Any appeal must be filed within 60 days after entry of a final decision by the board. Any person or other entity considering an appeal should consult with an attorney to ensure the time and procedural requirements are met. Thank you. With that, I'll move for a call. Let's do a roll call here to ensure we have quorum, although I do see our members here. Mr. Campbell-Gooch?
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell-Gooch. Mr. Martinez?
Here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Martinez. And Mr. Sweeney?
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Good afternoon. With that, we'll pause here. Mr. Pinkley, I see you here with the electronic meeting statement. We'll pause for that first.
All right. Thank you, Chair Davis. As we've done with all the meetings, I'll just give a brief rundown and then we'll need a motion and a vote. On March 20th, Governor Lee issued Executive Order 16, suspending some of the in-person quorum requirements for meetings. That order was extended by Executive Order 34 and then Executive Order 51, which allows us to meet electronically through the end of August. So we need to have a motion essentially stating that the board is meeting today to conduct essential business and is meeting electronically to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans.
Thank you, Mr. Pinkley. Anyone from that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Anyone second?
Sweeney.
Mrs. Very much. With that, any focused discussion? If not, take a roll call vote. Mr. Campbell-Gooch? Mr. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Sweeney?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Pinkley. We'll now move along with our approval of the minutes. Everyone should have received them. Our Executive Director Fitchard sent them to us last week. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Anyone second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Any focused discussion? Not, although or opposed, Mr. Gooch? Thank you, Mr. Martinez.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney.
Aye.
Thank you. I vote aye as well. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Let me just pause for a moment before there's one that I wanted to touch on here. And Executive Director Fitchard, you can just confirm for me. We're not going to meet again until we meet as a large, as the whole board for our August general body meeting. But one just update for the executive committee that if there's anything new to share, that we'll certainly share out. We did receive the written response from then Chief of Police Anderson. And since then, Executive Director Fitchard contacted him to request an in-person meeting. And since then, naturally, there's been a leadership change. So as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, Director Fitchard, correct me if I'm wrong, no meeting has been scheduled with the interim chief for this in-person meeting related to the immigration policy. Is that correct?
That's correct. I have not reached out to him in regards to that. So I was going to get some direction from you all to see if we wanted to move forward with that, and of course bring interim chief Drake up to speed on what was happening. I'm not sure if he's even aware.
Okay, great. No, I think so. Let's just pause here. I'd love to hear from the as to our thoughts on that. If nothing else, I think there certainly be a meeting between interim chief Executive Director Fitchard, but in that same meeting, it could serve two purposes. But I'd love to hear what the committee thinks as well. We know if we're in agreement on that, that's totally fine as well. Mr. Martinez, Sweeney.
I think that we should, unless he tells us that he is familiar with the issue and can meet with us about it, I think a first kind of introductory meeting between the new chief or the interim chief and Director Fitchard is the best idea. Not sure if we want to, put this in front of him if he hasn't had a chance to see it yet.
That's a good point, Mr. Martinez. So perhaps I take your point that meeting what we're saying, but also to share the material, maybe the email chain, so that he's got time to come up to speed and speak with his leadership team as well. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes, similarly, I think it would probably be a good idea for us actually to figure out, what are the top priority matters that we want to discuss with him as he fills this interim position. And then to send him, a letter or an email, congratulating him and asking for the opportunity to sit down and have an introductory meeting and to touch upon whatever those 5 or 6 issues are. And then at that time to establish meeting or meetings to get into the kind of guts of the various issues. But I think we should try to figure out, what's our priority at this point and what is it that we want to address with the interim and what, if anything, do we want to wait and say for the new chief.
Thank you, Gooch, and then Executive Director Fitchard.
Yeah, I support us synthesizing our priorities to make sure that there's
Mr. Kemba-Gooch, one second, got a chat action with you. It's you all on the other end, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Sweeney, if it's the same, it's kind of hard to hear you there.
It's the same.
Same.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay now? Is that better?
Perfect. Oh yeah, crystal clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
What I was going to say is I completely support us synthesizing our priorities down so that we can have a focused conversation. But I know some of the problems that we're having are extremely pressing. So it also feels like we should maximize the meeting. It's like trying to get something tangible on the board or just something tangible in the works.
So, Mr. Kamaguchi, are you saying you agree with the approach of having the kind of list? There are certain things you think should be center first and foremost, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. We should shy away from making sure our ask is extremely strong.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I take your point there too, and then I also just wonder. I'm thinking also about timing. How do we do this to make sure and ensure the full board has an opportunity to contribute their thoughts on, these top 3, and I don't know, maybe it's 3 to 5, so that we can be helpful to Executive Director Fitchard. But let's pause here with all that in mind, because maybe Director Fitchard, you have some thoughts on that too.
Yeah, thank you. So I went to a women's rally this weekend, and I saw, interim Chief Drake, and I spoke to him, and reintroduced myself. And, he seemed to be willing to meet with the COB. He said that was something that he was interested in. So I think that one of the thoughts that I had was we can probably get our priorities together today. And I think it would be good to invite him to the board, since he said he would definitely want to, meet with the board. I mean, we're having a meeting in, a week and a half. And so that's my thoughts too on that, so that everyone has this opportunity and he addresses the whole board. So that's one of my thoughts.
Thank you, Director Fisher. Mr. Campbell Gooch?
I was gonna say, like, yes, I love the idea of having him in front of the full board, and I think, like, for me, I think we definitely can come out of this meeting with a couple of priorities.
Okay. If we were to stick to just three, love to hear from the board. Are there any that come most immediately to mind? Maybe we're aligned already on a few already. Director Fisher?
Well, just to kind of bring you guys up to speed on something that has happened today that I think is definitely a priority is we received this letter from from the mayor's office on August the 5th, stating that we were going to have full cooperation with the opportunity to get the records that we need to move forward with this policing commission that myself and our research analyst, Dr. Valier and Liz Orozco, that we're going to be assisting the mayor with. And today, Dr. Valier requested, he made the request last week. He got his response today, and he has, of course, been denied a substantial amount of records, which is disappointing. And, it's the same playbook. And so I'm concerned that we are like spinning our wheels here. And I think that this is definitely a priority that we need to address with this new interim chief. So that's, to me, that is a number 1 priority. And the second thing is, when I met with interim Chief Drake, he mentioned the MOU, like when we were going to move forward on that. So if we can get some clarity around that today, that would be great as well.
Thank you, Director Fisher. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes, I was just going to say the MOU.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez?
I agree, the MOU. I don't know. I feel like we're going to get the same runaround from the interim chief. I don't know. I feel like he'll defer to what is being argued as to why we're being denied these records. And I don't know how helpful it's going to be to, I mean, we can ask, but I don't know if he's prepared to give these to us. I still think that the mayor should be doing everything in his power to ensure that MNPD is cooperating with our requests.
I agree, Mr. Martinez. Actually, Dr. Fisher, could you just speak to is the mayor's office aware of this latest response by MNPD to Mr. Martinez's point?
So this happened like within the last 30 minutes. Dr. Valier sent me the response from MNPD. I think he asked for let's say right around 95 use of force packets, because that's what he needed to, do his analytical, his analyst, his data search or whatever it is that he needed to do. But anyway, and so it looks like, based on what he told me, and this was right around 3:10 this afternoon, he received 63 records, 43 incident numbers were denials for open cases. And of course, it's the same, disappointing response, which is that we can request them from the district attorney's office. And then there was also 15, reports that were denied because they were juveniles, which I don't understand why they just didn't redact the information that, belonged to the juvenile. So we're looking at a total of, over 50 records that were denied. And so I asked Dr. Valier to reach out to John Bunton, because earlier we got a response that, hey, we're going to get these documents, and they're going to, the mayor's office is going to pay $500 of overtime costs for these records. And we received 63 reports, and it looks like maybe some of them are duplications. Dr. Valier can talk more on that, but I asked him to reach out to Mr. Bunton Mr. Bunton said that he would be listening in. I'm not sure if he's here or not, but the issue here, which I find super frustrating, is the fact that we are back to square one with these records. It's the same thing, that we're going back and forth to get records that we have, that number one, the mayor has asked for us to have. Mr. Bunton has said that he's in the meeting. So it's just something that we have to get, this is stopping progress. And, you know, it's frustrating. And so that's where we are with that now, Chair Davis. And so,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Martinez and Mr. Campbell Gooch.
Does OPA have access to juvenile records?
I don't think that they have full access to juvenile records. I think that there's some, if it's their record, they probably do. But I'm not really sure of the process. Let me say this. There is a form that they have to fill out to get juvenile records. And so I believe that they can have access, and they go through a records request. These aren't juvenile records. These are MMPD's use of force records that just happen to have a juvenile involved in them. And my argument would be that they should just redact the juvenile information, right? The child's name and their date of birth, and social security number, but that should not stop us from getting the record, the overall record, as it pertains to the use of force.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Campbell Gooch.
After what the director just laid out, I feel as though it is extremely important to have like a very direct, straightforward ask of the interim chief. Just to honestly, one, save time, because of the factors that Board Member Martinez and the brought up, and the frustration that I know Director Fisher has to be feeling, but to also just know straight up what we're dealing with. If it's going to be the same old, then we already know what's going to happen with that. So I say, like, to counterbalance that, just go in there with a straight ass that can't be confused with nothing other than getting access to records.
So point, Sir Campbell Gooch. So we have both a and long-term action item here. So look, in short term is, and I know that the line, but there's certainly right away there seems to be a need to flag in detail what is, and if if the mayor's office is unable to assist with this space, we certainly need to know why then as well, and engage DA Funk. I'm happy to know that we have some, but not all, and that doesn't help the cause of what we've been asked to do and what we've agreed to do as well. So Director Fisher, you let me know if you have a different thought on this on your end, but I would assume you'd need a little bit of time to allow Dr. Valier to just put together, it sounds, or share with you what he's been denied so that you could forward that over to Mr. Bunton. Or would he do that directly on your behalf?
Well, they gave us a detailed sheet of what's been denied. And so it looks like it's 43 records. They put the incident numbers on there. And they basically, now they're quoting, instead of just Rule 16, they're quoting the denial is based or not limited to Rule 16, the Tennessean versus Metro Government Nashville, some kind of codes in the Tennessee code annotated, and then some kind of 28 code of federal regulations. And then they say basically that these are state laws and rules of procedure limit the ability for them to disseminate open criminal case information to a non-party. An exception may be made by the Office of the DA. Now, about maybe 3 weeks ago, we had, had a meeting with Mr. Cooper, Bob Cooper, Metro Legal Director, and, we had talked to him about our, the problems that we're having getting these records, and he and General Funk, had worked towards getting us an expanded agreement regarding the records. But that hasn't, of course, been worked out because Mr. Cooper's been in like preparing for trials or whatever he's been doing. He's been extremely busy over the last 2 weeks. And so I asked our legal advisor to give him a call to find out where he was with this agreement. He hasn't been able to reach him. And then, of course, there's been a change in leadership. So, I don't think that should stop the progress, but I just think that Mr. Cooper has been kind of tied up and we haven't had an opportunity to get a response from him and General Funk in regards to the actual agreement and what it looks like and for them to agree to it. And it would have been between Chief Anderson, Metro Legal, and the DA General, General Funk, but that's kind of been stopped and placed on hold. So we do have, to your question, we do have a list of what has been denied. And General Funk may be willing to do this. I'm not really sure since we don't have that agreement intact.
Okay, so can for the short term here, can we just expedite that and send that before the end to not only Mr. Button, but I also think, and then you decide what this looks like. I think that needs to be, DA Funk needs to be made aware so that in some space, our leaders here can just act and move and get us over this hurdle. So even if this is a space where MMPD is unable/unwilling to be helpful as they've been guided and instructed by the mayor's office, we can have the folks positioned to do so, to simply say, move this boulder out of the road and act accordingly. And at the very least, if we do not get that kind of cooperation, then we know where they stand also. But I think we just need to put it in black and white and ask for an expedited response here, or at least an expedited meeting to have this discussion with all parties involved. Does that sound feasible to everyone? Director Fitchard included here. I see you raised Mr. Sweeney as well.
Yeah, I think that Bob Cooper should be on the distribution as well. And I'm also trying to figure out exactly what the police are saying, in the sense, are they saying a denial of access or a denial of, for lack of better description, physical transfer? So if we went to some space on their, property, or if we were reviewing on their computers or something like that, would they be raising the same issues? I mean, what I don't understand is we are part of the same government entity. We are part of the metropolitan government. So it's not that they're transferring something out to some third party. So I don't understand the legal basis for the refusal to make information available to another agency of the same government who is directed by the mayor of that government to do this review of a matter that's within its charter authority. So I don't understand the circuity of all of this, other than pure obstructionism. And so I'm trying to figure out if it makes a difference if we go someplace to look at data versus the fact that they say they can't give it to us.
I absolutely agree, Mr. Sweeney, on adding Mr. Cooper in that space. And perhaps, quite frankly, also Deputy Drake needs to be, I think, without a doubt, included there as well, because perhaps he'll say that he was not aware of this, the decline that we just received. But I feel it's important that he does know, because the community is expecting as such. Mr. Kambaguchi, I know you've been waiting a bit there, so let me pause here and yield to you.
My comments was essentially very much close to Board Member Sweeney, especially around the, I think Director Fitcher said a non-party, which I thought that was like, at this point, I think that it's interesting that those are the mechanisms that they're using to deny a records request, and it's very like awkward and weird. But I had to say that because of the way it I don't know no more. Like I'm not gonna lie, I don't know no more. But yeah, like I also wanted to say like anything I can do to help. I don't know what else I can lend, but anything I can do to help. You know, that's all.
Mr. Campbell, Ms. Sam, let me yield to Ms. Director Fisher. I see you.
Yeah, thank you. One of the other things is, I know that we have this is important. I'm trying to figure out if we need to just move forward with our MOU as well as with this, because I think that, as you know, Member Sweeney said, and Mr. Campbell Gooch, the MOU will address this records issue really, really quickly. Because I think that everything that we want as it pertains to records and how we're moving forward would be, in the MOU. So, I mean, I'm gonna let you guys decide on what direction you want to go. But I think the MOU situation is going to help expedite this. And like I said before with the MOU is exactly what we need. We checked it. There's not a whole lot of room, in my opinion, for negotiation with it. And that's where we need to move. But I'll yield to you all to make the decision.
Director Fisher, I just want to kind of said MOU, but can we just be, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. When we speak of the MOU, we're speaking of adding that as a top tier priority as it relates to coming back to the table, renegotiating and adding in some fine language to get to some resolutions. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, we're saying I think that the MOU, it addresses our records issue, right? It addresses everything that we want as it pertains to records. And I mean, of course, these records are for the mayor, right? But it also, I mean, it would still give us access to these types of records, even though this is one situation. And so when I talk about going to the table, I'm saying, we haven't really set up a time, or we haven't really discussed the process of what we're going to do next as it pertains to this new MOU that we have created and approved at the last board meeting.
Okay, let me go to Mr. Martinez. I see.
I agree with Director Fitchard. I think we should reach out to the chief with the urgent matter of acquiring the records needed for the mayor's commission, and also couch that in a request to review and come to an agreement on the revised MOU, saying that it would solve this issue.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Martinez. So it sounds like majority of us here, we're in agreement here, the approach of reaching out to Chief for this conversation on two parts. Is that right? If you could just stay on mute, Mr. Martinez, I want to make sure I'm summarizing this right. You said one, for the discussion of the access for the records that we've already asked for, but also to clarify and revise the points of the MOU. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Martinez?
Yes. So there's what we need right now are the records, but to solve this, or to ensure that this does not happen again, we need to also review the MOU.
Gotcha. Okay. Mr. Campbell Gooch.
I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that it would only take the decision person to rectify this whole situation. But also, we're looking to expand the MOU, correct?
That's correct. The MOU has already been expanded. It is where it needs to be. It encompasses everything that we need, and the MNCO needs to do the work that we've been mandated by Amendment 1 to do. And I think that it is it incorporates the records issue and a host of other things that we've learned from months, from the moment I started this employment in December as the executive director up until we approved it in July. So for 7 months, we have worked on an MOU that lacked and was lackluster at best, and it lacked what we needed. And so we have made those changes and fixes. So I don't know if it needs to be any more. I don't think there's nothing else to do except for them to approve it. It is ready to go.
Okay, Mr. Cambaguchi, any follow up there?
I was gonna say, well, I think that should be the number one priority. It's the getting that done. But I think Chair, feels like we're in consensus.
It does, yeah. So totally fine. This approach, Mr. Sweeney, I'll come right to you. Two things here, and I appreciate the guidance I'm getting here as well. The MOU, I absolutely think should be front and center. So Director Fisher, if you could reach out to Interim Chief Drake for that matter, I think would be fantastic. But I also feel it's important. There's a space here where DA Funk can stand up and be immediately helpful as well. And I think my point here is that I think we'd be remiss if we did not reach out to him. That's why I mentioned him earlier. I appreciate also Mr. Cooper. Bob Cooper should be a part of this conversation too. But I just want to know from the board if we're in agreement on this too, because I think we need to make a direct ask of DA Funk, who could give us that access as well. Feel free, Mr. Else here.
I do think that we have two separate things. And I think that the immediate records ask is one thing, and that should be our first priority, and the MOU is the second. And the reason for that is that the records ask, I think, can be resolved right now with direct intervention from the mayor's office, telling the police department that these are part of the use of force review, and I want it done, and I want it done now. And whatever niceties have to be done in order to affect that, those niceties can be accomplished, whether it's traveling through the DA's office or otherwise. And I think that's something that I would think could be resolved, very, very promptly. The MOU, as Director Fisher noted, is a rewrite of what we had of the previous document, making it from aspirational, where there was the belief, hope maybe would have been a better word, that the police department was going to cooperate as they said they were going to. And it becoming clear over the 7 months that that wasn't true, that the MOU was redrafted to be detailed and specific and to provide that we have the functional equivalencies in everything that we do to the OPA because we have the same relative function as the OPA as granted to us under the charter, and anything else is obstruction. But there are some things there that may be appropriate for discussion, including, the training provisions that we added in and expanded. And there may be some other language issues and all like that. So that's not something that I think can be accomplished immediately. Plus, there is a mechanism that's been established for doing that. And member Phyllis Hildreth is our representative, as we confirmed at our last board meeting, to represent us at that meeting. And that meeting is a combination between the police department and us and the mayor's office and Bob Cooper. So I think that it's important to bring both of these to the attention of Acting Chief Drake. But the immediate concern is the records that we need to do what the mayor wants. Then we need to set up the meeting and the mechanism for the MOU. And then I think we should state in there, about the policy recommendation. I don't think that we should leave that hanging, but just say that's another thing that we'll want to discuss after we get these two resolved. That's what I would suggest.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Agree wholeheartedly, Mr. or Mr. Kambagooch and Director. Any thoughts on that approach or otherwise?
Yeah, I'm fine with that approach. I can definitely reach out to General Funk first thing tomorrow morning and send him over the list. Now, in the past, they have said to me on multiple occasions that they do not have use of force records. So that's my only issue. We have asked them in the past for those, and they did not have those in their arms system. So, I mean, and I'm looking at, and I sent you guys the list. So, you know, the response from records, so you can look at it. It's in your email box. It should be now. Because it is a significant amount of incident reports, use of force packages. And if they don't have them, then they just don't have them. And so that's another problem, right? So if they're referring us to the DA's office. If the DA office says, well, Ms. Fitchard, Director Fitchard, I don't have these records, we're back to square one.
Mm-hmm. And is that an email, Director?
That I've had a discussion with the liaison. Yes, we've had discussions back and forth with her, and you know, we've asked for them, and she's like, we just don't have. They're not in our. They're not in. We don't have access to those records. And because at some point, sometimes they don't even need that particular. What they get, just to be, this is what happens. What the DA gets is stuff that they need regarding, or documents that they need regarding moving forward in their court cases. Mm-hmm. So, you know, sometimes those use of force reports are not included in their case prep file. And so my concern is if it's not in their case prep file, when they're referring us to the DA's office to get them, and the DA office doesn't have access to them, how is it that the DA's office can say to MMPD to give us something that they don't have? I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Thank you. Mr. Sweeney?
Yeah, I would think, and you know, since John Button is on the phone, I think that the first step might be with Director Fitchard and John Button to talk together and see whether or not the mayor's office will go directly to the acting chief and basically just tell him to give us what we want and figure out how it's going to get done, but it's going to get done. And if for whatever reason the mayor's office is not going to do that, then to do the direct approach to Chief Drake with copies to General Funk and to Bob Cooper and to the mayor's office, of course, as well, saying this is our frustration, and you send us here to get this, and the DA's office says they don't have it, and so you know that is just another delay tactic, and lay it out the way it is. And I don't think that we should waste our time going to Glenn Funk's office if they don't have it. But I think that he should be involved in the loop in the communication as to what we're trying to get and how we've been directed or misdirected in attempts to get to it. And just kind of lay it out directly in the event that the mayor's office advises us tomorrow that they're not just going to take it under their wing themselves and get it for us.
Thank you, Mr. Kambagooch. Mr. Kambagooch here.
So like I'm thinking, like, I don't want to assume that any of the folks that we've talked about with power in this situation will actually use it to the benefit of oversight. And so I'm just curious about what direction we go if all of this turns out to be business as usual. And so I think that question is directed to, I think, everyone who is in attendance to this meeting, because I think we're gonna need deep strategy. And I think we're gonna need to do something new so that we don't drive ourselves up a wall, per se, for lack of a better phrase, trying to do the same thing over and over again.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. I think you raise an important point, Mike. I see you, I think you raised Director Fitcher. Is there Director Fitcher? Or was that accident?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in regards to what Member Campbell Gooch said, like this is a spinning circle, like this is like Groundhog Day. We start this over and over and over again. And my concern here is the fact that these use of force reports are important to the work that we do. And when they continue to deny us these records, it raises many red flags, in my opinion, that they don't want us to see what's in these reports. And I'm super concerned about that. And everyone in this community should be concerned about that.
I think you're right, Dr. Fitcher. And I believe that that press is 2 points raised by 1 point. I think I just want to raise that Mr. Campbell Gooch is saying here. If we find, I know this communication, all these will go out today. We find we don't have a response resolution, and also short term and long term. One, getting the records we need most immediately expedited, but then long term, having the agreement in place so this doesn't happen again. We do need to employ a different approach here, and I am open to ideas and approaches here, but also realize, and I would hope that our leaders in the city realize this is not the time to be engaged in any type of tactic that can be even halfway seen as obstructionism. It's just not. And I would think that Nashville would want to be different, but I also realize there are times when I've been disappointed. I don't want us to spend more time than we need to here, but I stopped this here because I felt like this was important for the executive committee and then larger board to discuss here. Mr. Martinez, I see you here.
To Mr. Kemmel's point, I don't know if it's a good time for me to give an update on my work with Metro Council regarding our subpoena power, should we ever have to go through them.
Please do. Yeah, thank
you. Councilmember Bob Mendez has filed a proposed ordinance that would make it, or make the process for us to request a subpoena through council. This way, whenever we would like council to issue a subpoena to anyone, it won't have to go through 3 readings. So the first reading is coming up at the next council meeting, I believe. And if this ordinance will have to go through 3 readings, but once this is passed, then our ability to request a subpoena from Metro Council will be a lot easier. That being said, the problem that we're having with MNPD not giving these records is between 2 city agencies. So it's not very clear how one city agency is supposed to sue another or subpoena another city agency. Example given is, if we all work for the same company and I work in HR and you work in finance, I don't go seek a subpoena to get a record from either, me and HR. I don't subpoena finance to get this record, right? There's one person in charge, and that person should be able to, make the decision here.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Anything else you think we should? No, I believe to your point that that meeting would be on August, correct? The reading would that next Tuesday, Director Fitcher, is that correct?
That is correct. I think it's at 6 o'clock.
Okay, fantastic. So those of us that and certainly will be listening. Any additional comments, guidance, anything on this matter before we move forward? Mr. Sweeney, I see you unmuted there. Just want to extend if you have something you want to say.
No.
Okay, Coach.
Yeah, I wanted to thank community member Martinez for moving so rapidly on that and giving that update. And I also wanted to put a pin in all of this. What we're talking about right now is awkward because it's between two government bodies. So that feels like even the MOUs, none of this really makes any sense as far as when we talk about like good governance. I know people on the call know that, and I guess I'm just saying that for myself.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, I was curious if we could assist in any type of way. I know we have a legal team with that ordinance to make sure like there's nothing that we're overlooking, or is that just, do people feel like that's just too much?
Thank you, Mr. Kamaguchi. Anyone have Mr. Martinez? Thing there?
I think our team did see it. What Bob Mendes proposed was actually written during the Briley administration, I believe, and shortly after the state voted to take away our subpoena powers. So it was something that was sitting somewhere collecting dust, and thankfully Councilmember Mendez knew about it, and it was, I think I'm pretty sure the team reviewed it. I think you, Chair, reviewed it as well, and Mr. Sweeney. I don't know, to Mr. Kamaguchi's point, I think what we can do is, urge our communities and community members to be there for these next 3 council meetings, and urge them to contact their council members to make sure that this gets passed.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. I'd like to mention each member of the board. We all are community members as well, in addition to being board members. And so, I want to confirm that date and time, but Dr. Fitchard, if you wouldn't mind, if we could just make the entire board aware of this upcoming date and encourage members to ensure their leaders that represent them know how important this is too. But I think we certainly should make the public aware of it, but also push to ensure those that can do use their position to support this. And I couldn't echo even more strongly, Mr. Martinez, thank you for working so diligently and quickly on this. It really is important in the short term around too. Mr. Kamaguchi, anything else on your end there related to this matter, or Mr. Sweeney for that matter too? I know you said no already, Mr. Sweeney, but unmute if you'd like. Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank
Okay, so we'll move here to the discussion of the community forums for the chief of police search. And I'll just offer a quick overview here. Everyone's seen the email I sent out. I shared 3 dates, and just want to share out kind of where my mind was on this. I'm sure you all have seen, whether it's media, news, we're on social media platforms. I have emails I received from members of the public, and communication, and it became readily apparent to me, just as a basic, everyday resident of the city, but also as a member of this board, that the community felt that they wanted to be heard in more than one space, and that it also is just critically important that the Community Oversight Board continues to do what we've always done, which is be centered on the community. We previously discussed holding in-person community forums to hear what qualities, background, characteristics, issues that the community felt should be at the top of mind for the search committee. But with COVID and the need for us to remain safe, both individually and collectively, the virtual platform is our safest option, and does still allow us to hear from members of the community if we are able to. And if I could ask everyone to put their phones on mute here, if we're able to create space and time for people to plan ahead, whether it's sending in their notes to our email address or calling ahead of time and recording their voice. I think it's just really important that we find a space to do that intentionally. So that's where that's coming from. I sent it out to the entire board, just this kind of potential idea of the community forums being held over the course of about 2.5 weeks. The idea also would be that we would need to come together and share ideas of, organizations, community members that we would, believe that would get that word out and have people speak out. And then I also thought it might be important that we split these 3 meetings into the constituency groups that we have before identified as being specifically, particularly marginalized in our community. And so that's where you saw me kind of break out, community 1, a meeting being focused in 1 space, 2 and 3. All of this to say 2 things. 1, I'd love to know how the executive committee feels here about this approach. And then also there may be some updates Director Fisher can share with us, because I did ask just how feasible this would be to get all this information pulled together. And then 2, there's the Metro Human Relations Commission that sent us a recruitment roadmap. I believe it's almost a month or so ago. It was in early July that they sent us a communication outlining steps that they were hoping to deploy as it relates to engaging different constituency groups. And so once I sent my email last week, board member Dr. Hildreth reminded Director Fitchard and myself of the communication that we previously received and the invitation for the COB to partner with the Metro Human Relations Commission on this engagement of the community. So there's 2 asks here. Are we in agreement of doing this type of community forum? And then 2, is there agreement also of partnering with MHRC to ensure we can reach a broader community group? So let me go, y'all, answer questions and also go mute for comments. Mr. Sweeney.
I think the forums are a good idea, but I'm a little concerned about the way that we propose approaching them. We've made a point very appropriately that we have not been engaged with other organizations that have overlapping responsibilities, particularly in criminal justice. And therefore we should be included in those. And then this proposal, as I first read it, was basically us going off and doing these hearings on our own and not doing it jointly, particularly with HRC, who invited us before, to work collaboratively with them, and with the mayor's office that has also stated their interest as far as getting community input. Not that we have to partner with any of them, but at least communications before we make a decision as to how we're going to proceed, I think are important. So that's the first part. Should this be more collaborative rather than just on our own? And then number 2 is, I think all the groups that we have identified are ones that are marginalized and whose voices should be heard, but I'm not sure, even with that broad outreach, whether we have captured everyone we need to hear from. So for example, I was thinking, we don't have anything there about domestic violence or mental health or victims in particular, or anything touching on trafficking. And so I was wondering if we need to, figure out if there are other groups or communities that should be part of this input as well. So two things, how we go about it and who we work with or at least communicate with.
Yeah.
And then are there other groups that we should, be involving in this community input?
Mr. Sweeney, no, I take your point about the, in fact, I think, this collaboration between COB and other entities actually does nothing but broaden or bolster what we're hoping to do here. So I'm in full support of that. And I really appreciate the three additional points here around human trafficking, domestic violence, health. You charge all things to my head, not my heart here, not trying to be exclusive, but rather just trying to put this together and honestly put a draft of what was keeping me up at night into a letter form to the board. And that's exactly why I'm thankful for the time to hear from everyone here. But I think those are great and needed additions there. Mr. Martinez, Mr. Kemaguch, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts, each of you gentlemen. Mr. Martinez?
Yeah, I'm concerned about having in-person meetings. I know that there are ways that we can be socially distant, but recognizing where we still are as a city, if we are not meeting in person, I think we shouldn't expect our community members to do that as well. But I do think that more needs to be done. Thank you, Chair, for bringing this up. I think it's really important because I think the current survey that exists is not engaging or adequate or accessible enough, especially since it is online and we frankly overestimate digital literacy, and it is only available in English, I think. So you are completely right. We need to do more outreach. I'm thinking, one way that we could add to the discussion is maybe reaching out to community organizations for their comments, or asking them to say or put in writing what they would like to see, and with the idea that perhaps they are speaking from the perspective of the communities that they represent.
So, 2 points here, and I'm very sorry if I wasn't clear in that email, but I absolutely am proposing fully virtual meetings, all three of them. And take your point, absolutely agree. Our city, our state, we are not positioned, especially to have any in-person meetings. I myself have not had any since March, so I absolutely agree with that. I also love the idea. Also, perhaps it's just one simple question to your point, Mr. Martinez, of what does your community group or your organization envision in the next chief of police, and leaving it open-ended so that we can get responses back in the form that the respondent feels is most appropriate. And did I take that correct from you, Mr. Martinez? Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's great. And I'll come to you, Mr. Kemaguch. And I'd love to get some thoughts here. It sounds like we're quite aligned. The dates that I offered, I had community forum the 24th, the 31st, both of those are Mondays, and then the 2nd of Wednesday. My plan, at least, conceptually what I had in mind, was that these meetings could take place ahead of the Labor Day holiday, and to offer a bit of space and time for MNCO to our staff led by Director Fisher to compile all of this information that we receive and prepare some type of a report that we could then share out to the community, to city leaders, to the board, of course. And we have to move quite quickly here, at least in my mind. I feel that we should, unless the timetable is changed. My understanding, I keep hearing about the month of, the fall, October, November. I don't want us to be behind the 8 ball here. And I don't know anything about, the full formation of, the selection committee and who will officially sit on that. But I do think that the voice of the people needs to be in place before these meetings take place. And so I don't want to be overly ambitious here too. If we need to push this back to first week of September or post Labor Day to happen to give the community groups time, I'm okay with that as well. Just wanted to offer a full scope of what I was thinking about there. Mr. Campbell Gooch.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like, I love this, Chair. I think, like, especially, I think this wraps our arms around every person who experiences police, and then, like, and each one of these groups experience police harm in a very specific way. So I like the idea of wrapping our arms around them. I also wanted to mention that I think these forms could also seemingly gain information or train folks on the community oversight functions, and really be a platform to dive into our struggles with the records. So I'm almost viewing them as not only getting information about, like, what the chief should look like, but also giving information on, like, what's limiting this body, and what kind of changes need to take place. So I'm thinking about it as, like, we're getting in information and doing deep listening, and at the same time we're explaining to folks our problems, and then directing them on how to help.
It's just some guidance there, Mr. Campbell Gooch, to ensure we get the most out of these conversations, what you're saying.
Absolutely, because I'm thinking if we pull these forms together, I think we would be missing something if we didn't use those to explain to people, like, the record issue and what could be a solution.
Mm-hmm. Well, I take your point. So if we're and Dr. Fisher, love to hear your thoughts here. Just contours we're not thinking about, but other pieces there. But I think when we chatted too, we're talking about what type of communication piece we could put together. Members of the public understand kind of the current state, but also have an opportunity to speak and answer as they want to freely. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Dr. Fisher, as well.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't had an opportunity to get with Brenzy to see exactly how we would go about the messaging, but I think that we would, make certain that we post this up. We all have access to not only Zoom, which I think is probably better for the public than WebEx, but we have a Zoom account. I also have set up something with Metro ITS, so people could, call in. If I'm in the office, I'll go into the office and record them. We have access to do that as well. Give them an access number to do that, and possibly be able to record them in our office via Zoom. And so I haven't really thought completely all the ins and outs of it, but I have talked with our community liaison and thought about how we were going to message and how we would be able to present those to the board, or have everyone involved in it. And we haven't worked it out yet, so excuse me for that. I'm sorry. I haven't worked through the whole plan. Sorry.
Not a problem, Mr.
Yeah, a couple of questions for Director Fitcher. Based upon the forums that we have held before and what it took to bring those about, with everything else that MNCO is doing right now, including what we talked about with the research for the use of force and the resolution reports that are being readied for presentation to the board. is there time, this month and extending into, the first week of September to do everything that the MNCO would have to do in order to hold 3 remote forums? Is that doable?
Great question.
Well,
Dr.
I was
Fisher.
looking at the calendar. I'm sorry. I was looking at the calendar as we were talking, and I think that it would be challenging to get all 3 done, as well as get our SOPs completed. I think I talked to Dr. Valier in regards to this report, because he's also working on this huge endeavor as it pertains to the Policing Policy Commission, and he might want to speak to that as well, because he and I briefly talked about what Chair Davis had proposed, but without hearing from the MHRC in regards to what the collaboration looks like and who they have on board to assist, because they have a research analyst as well. I can't really determine whether or not we can move forward or if it's going to be too much, because if their research analyst is going to take a huge portion of, or they're going to take some responsibility in handling the remote, having these remote sessions with the community, then we might be able to get everything that we need to get done, and we won't overstretch ourselves. But I would ask Dr. Valier, what do you think about the 5-page report? Is that going to be too much, especially with what you have going on now?
I think, I am fully in support of getting as much feedback as possible. Our resources are pretty stretched right now as far as being able to do the analysis and work on the reports. We would, especially if we're able to host these sessions, work on compiling those and can, work with Human Relations Commission researcher, Ms. Imran, to make that happen. Though it definitely is a making sure that the outreach and the communication, that there is enough space and availability for that.
Gotcha. Okay, so it sounds like, to be on the safe side here, we look to likely push this back a week comfortably. If they are able to extend the resources and support necessary to make it feasible. I've been invited to a meeting tomorrow, just pending our agreement here to move forward with collaborating with MHRC to listen in on the plan they have about engaging the community, and also to share what the executive committee has in mind as well. And so I can take all of this in mind and then also share it out, just that we want to make sure that it is feasible for all parties, meaning specifically the community, not to feel rushed, but also that our COB is and MNCO are able to be deployed appropriately too. Does that work as a plan for everyone, for the executive committee? Does that sound good, as well as Director Fitcher? And if so, is there a motion to that effect too?
I'll move to proceed that way. I don't know if I can say it all correctly.
That's okay. Well, let me hit. Thank you, Mr. Martinez. So, it sounds like we're in agreement to host these community forums at a minimum 3, actually 4, because we certainly want to include the groups that Member Sweeney just raised. So that's part 1, and then 2, that we would be collaborating with Metro Human Relations Commission, and let me just leave it there first, unless someone has an amendment here or thinks that we should also add in language about partnering with the mayor's office on this as well, because that's certainly something we could explore as well. Mr. Sweeney?
A question and a comment.
Yeah.
You said 3 or 4. I would like for the other groups to be included in our discussion, and so make it 4 groups, and then talk and see if there's any other groups that haven't been mentioned that we should be thinking about as well. And then number 2, you know, the mayor's office has other things that it's trying to accomplish. I don't think we necessarily need to partner with the mayor's office, but just to coordinate with the mayor's office to let them know what we're doing and what the product is going to be, and our expectations on providing the product to them.
Good. That's a good point. And just like we were extended invitation, quite frankly, to the public safety meeting, we can extend invitations to them as well to join our meeting, including that of the mayor. I think it makes perfect sense, and coordinating makes perfect sense as well. Are you raised there still, Mr. Sweeney?
I shouldn't be.
Okay, not a problem. Mr. Martinez, do you feel equipped to make a motion now?
I can't. I'm not going to be able to repeat that.
That's okay.
But I make the motion.
In 1 second, I'll be clear on what the motion on the floor is. In 1 second.
I'll second with the understanding is that it's of the 4 groups, and that we're going to hold forums, and that we're going to seek to do this in partnership with the HRC and in coordination and notice to the mayor's office.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Let's do focus discussion, because I do want to be clear, Mr. Sweeney, when you say the 4 constituency groups that, or the blocks of groups that well, 3 right now that I listed in the email, my original email.
The 3 that you listed, and then a 4th comprised of domestic violence, mental health, victims' rights, and trafficking. And any other group that we've missed that people think we should include.
Yes, absolutely. Got you. Any additional focus discussion here? Mr. Campbell Gooch.
I was I'm just curious about how we can do outreach into those groups. I know groups like WYCA might have some folks, and then I'm also thinking about how we conduct this conversation without triggering folks, especially if we're talking about grouping people by their traumas. So that might not have nothing to do with the focus discussion as far as the proposal that's on the floor, but I just wanted to hold that right there.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell Gooch. Or rather, Director Fitcher.
I just need to be clear. So with these groups, we're going to be asking them specifically on things that we want to see in our next chief of police. It's not going to be dealing with the use of force. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. And I'm sure that the topic may come up, but the central purpose of these community forums is to ask, to hear from the community what they want to see in their next chief of police, whether that's knowledge, expertise, experience, etc.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell Gooch, are you still raised there?
Yeah, and then I would also like to add that we would be giving them basically like information on the board as well, whether that is what we're struggling with, but also like how they can be actively helping.
Thank you, Mr. Important point. And I'm happy you'll have to have time to kind of confer and get with your leadership team and members there, but I'm happy to be helpful there as you kind of form up what that language looks like, because we want to send out as clear of a message and language once we have some final details from MHRC should this vote move forward. But I'll extend myself, and I'm sure the leadership team will too, as you need us as well.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing, because I think that in MHRC, from my understanding, they have a 3-person task force that's going to be helping with this. And so I'm assuming that, and I don't know, because of course this will be your first meeting, that they may want to collaborate with how the messaging is going to be out as well. So if you, in your meeting tomorrow, if you can just get more clarity on that, that would be helpful.
Yep, absolutely. And I actually thought you were on there. You not on that invite, Dr. Pitcher?
No, I wasn't on there.
Well, could you reach out to?
I think I may have been, but I didn't respond. So I mean, I thought that it was just an information. I didn't know she was inviting me to be a part of it. So.
Okay. Well, I'm just a recipient of the invite as well, but I would encourage, if your calendar allows for you to be present there, I think that's important as well, for you to be present and during that meeting. And that way we can share here, but also what was come out of this meeting here. Makes perfect sense. Any other additional focused discussion here? Mr. Sweeney, I see your anything?
No, nothing.
Thank you. If there's no additional focused discussion, we'll take the vote here. Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Sweeney.
Aye.
Thank you. And I vote aye as well. Thank you. The motion carries and passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Let me just, our only full agenda item here. Is there any new business or notice that any member of the executive committee would like to make before we adjourn? Mr. Campbell-Gooch?
I do want to bring up, I am receiving anonymous letters. And I think some other folks are around the city, and they feel like whistleblower complaints. And they are very detailed and very thorough. And so I think one thing that we need to handle as a board, because this is not the first time, is how we deal with these whistleblower complaints. And the reason I say that is because like some of these letters even say, please don't share this with anyone because I trust you. So I just wanted to mention that here. And like, I think we should be thinking through what we can do as a board and how we proceed with those type of correspondence.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell-Gooch. Let me go first to Mr. Sweeney.
No, sorry, nothing.
Nothing there. Okay. Director Pitcher.
I just wanted to, this was in regards to the records. If you have something you want to talk about before that, then I can come back to this.
Okay. Yep. That should address Mr. Campbell-Gooch here.
Okay, sure.
So I think in that, but I do a space where we need to be aligned here. I think there's kind of important, there's importance here, and maybe there's space for our site, for our platforms and other spaces to share what are the proper steps to make the MNCO, the COB aware of whatever, and I haven't read what you're speaking of here, but most immediately of what's going on. But I do recognize also that when people communicate to us, sometimes they're not aware that doesn't start the process of the investigation happening most immediately. I would say to every member of the board, however, unless there's someone saying explicitly, do not share this out, that sharing it directly with Director Fitchard, I believe would always be the best first step. But I'm open to, I want to hear also what other members of the executive committee feel here. Of course, Director Fitchard, what you think as well. But the process can't begin unless an official complaint has been filed, so then an investigation can begin. Am I correct about that, Director Fisher?
Yeah, so there's two things here. And so when you get a complaint and it says doesn't share with anyone, and you feel like the complaint is egregious, then I think that you definitely need to share it with me. Then that way I can vet the complaint and determine whether or not it falls within our jurisdictional authority. If it's something that has happened from April 1, until now, it's something that we can possibly look at and then refer that person to file a formal complaint. If it is something that is older and it's, a list of multiple issues, I think that the process that we do, like you said, Chair Davis, we do need to have a process in place on how to deal with complaints that may not fit within our jurisdictional authority, unless the mayor wants to expand our authority, which, I'm open to that. And number two, if it's as Mr. Campbell-Guccic said, that it could be considered possibly a whistleblower complaint, then I think that is something that we need to have a particular function and a process that goes through, depending on what the complaints are, through the district attorney's office. And then I think the third component is educating the public on the types of complaints that we can handle. So that's where we are, and I have spoken to General Funk, not extensively, but generally in regards to getting with him and his team and creating a process so that when people who may not want to reveal themselves or file a formal complaint with us, that they have another avenue. And we have the authority to, based on our bylaws and what the amendment says, we have the authority to, move these cases forward to the district attorney's office if they are criminal in nature. So that's where I am with that. I haven't spent a lot of time talking with him in regards to what those steps would look like, but that's something that's on my list to do.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. It's a good space and opportunity. I know that there's been community forums before. Perhaps this is a good space for us to figure out how can we do, even if it's just minutes of what you might not know about the COB, how to file a complaint, what falls currently within our jurisdiction, how we can change that. If we see a space where the community is saying we need you to be able to do this as well. But I take Mr. Campbell-Gucci's point of wanting to do something, especially when something so egregious as he's described it is raised for you. Mr. Campbell-Gucci, I see you raised here, so let me yield to you too.
Yeah, so and I appreciate that. I think it makes it clear for me. What I'm thinking through as I receive these letters is, what if this is a police officer? And so I'm also hoping and suggesting that we come up with a system of like how to protect police officers who may want to complain, who have witnessed a use of force event that they want to be investigated. So I wanted to say that here as well.
Thank you. Important too. Director Fisher, have you any thoughts on that or anything to share there on that?
Yeah, I think that in our current MOU, it also protects employees. And so an officer can come to us and file a complaint. The problem here is we still have that issue with April 1, 2019. And so if we can get beyond that, and like I said, maybe the mayor can do an executive order or something to expand our jurisdictional authority, then that would be helpful. But right now, Member Gooch, an officer can come directly to us and file a complaint. That is a part of our current MOU. And I would, suggest that they, if they don't know much about it, our MOU is online for them to read through it and see how they can, file that complaint through us.
Thank you, Director Fisher. Mr. Martinez.
I just wanted to clarify that the date we set for investigating cases was one that we made up and it's in our bylaws. So I think it would take us changing it, us meeting again to amend the bylaws to change the date if we wanted to do that. But to Mr. Kawaguchi's point, how do we create a system where, you know, if there is no adequate investigation or if people from the inside don't think that there's enough being done to address a certain issue, how can we investigate that? How can we proactively investigate that? If there's been reporting of a pattern, you know, can we conduct a broader investigation, more like an audit rather than, you know, an investigation on a single complaint?
Single point, Mr. Martinez. Thank you for raising that. Dr. Fisher, any thoughts? A broader review process rather than specific?
Yeah, I mean, we do have the authority to audit and monitor. But if they have never filed a complaint and they have just been, you know, taking notice of different situations that have happened, I don't know if that would fall under that. I think, you know, because if there's not a complaint to initiate, right? If they have never filed a complaint about, you know, behaviors that they have either experienced themselves or witnessed, then it would seem to me that they need to file a complaint with us, and then we can like work through what the issues at hand are.
Mr. Martinez?
I would say I'm thinking more in the lines of something like a policy research report where, you know, if we take the example of what's going on in the media right now, that the topic is, you know, neglecting investigating or adequately investigating sexual harassment claims. I think that there's room for us to do a kind of broad research project on what investigation into sexual harassment claims has looked like in MNPD over the years.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I do want to say that I think that, so there's several things happening here. Let's just, if we use that particular instance or that particular issue, you know, Metro HR as well as MNPD HR, you know, they are equipped to handle what, you know, sexual harassment. And I think that if they're not handling these claims, you know, for people who are filing them, because those fall under the civil service rules. Every employee of Metro government takes a training on that. If they violate those policies, there's mechanisms in place. And so if a person feels like those things are not being addressed, and they feel like, you know, if they're not being addressed and they, you know, aren't getting any relief from those types of behaviors from a particular whomever, then I think that they should feel comfortable enough to come and if they don't feel comfortable, they can still file it online and let us work through it. I do think that those cases, because, you know, we've been, you know, I think that those cases could be a little more difficult because of course you're, you know, you're having to, I don't know if there's any records or documents attached to them. Like, of course, when you have other complaints, there's like CAD reports and calls for service and things of that nature. And so we do need to get a mechanism in place that offers the same types of protections that Metro HR, I don't know, and I don't know much about MNPD HR, but I do know that there's civil service protection for people who are filing those types of complaints. And so we just need to, as Member Gooch stated, we need to have a process in place as well. And I think that what Member Martinez said is accurate as well. We can do some research into, how often these things are coming. But before we even do that, if someone is experiencing those types of issues, we need to be able to quickly move forward and address those. And so that's something that myself and my leadership team can work on towards. What would that process look like? I think that it's something that we definitely need to talk to Metro HR about in regards to what they do for these type of administrative investigations on their end, and see if there's something that we can do, if there's documents or information that we can work towards collectively on how we would handle that. So I'll just have to do some more research into that.
Let's go. Let me go to see Ms. Sweeney's hand is down here. Let me go to Mr. Campbell Gooch, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Martinez.
I just wanted to cue it up even more for folks. I think if they're going out of their way to drop letters off, it feels like there's more fear happening here, and there's more fear around retaliation from people that are inside and hold power. So I feel like these are folks who are keeping up with the COB, so they might even be on the phone. So I just feel the need to mention that the broader corruption that a lot of these letters are talking about, I feel there's a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety in them. And so I'm just trying to put my mind in that state. And if I were in that state and I didn't believe that there was a just person in the system, period, then I wouldn't use those traditional functions. But I still feel like they're deserving of protection and our services.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell Gooch. It's absolutely agree. Mr. Martinez.
I hadn't unraised my hand, sorry.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Any additional thoughts here, Director Fisher? Thank you, gathering your executive team to discuss this. If you would it at the very least just be able to share a bit of an update on what your team has discussed thus far at this month's board meeting? That would be helpful for the greater board to be aware of. And if there's additional thoughts on this, I certainly want to open it up for discussion there as well. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, that gives us some time to sit down and talk about it and work through it, and then me also reaching out to see if there's particular things that I need to do not only as an independent agency, but also through the protection of the civil service as well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Any additional new business or announcements here, Director Fisher? Yes, one of the things I wanted Mr. Pinkley to give you an update. While we were talking, he had an update from Mr. Cooper, Bob Cooper, regarding the records, and I just want to go ahead and get that out there. So if Mr. Pinkley, can you give the board, the executive committee, an update on what your conversation was with Mr. Cooper?
Sure. So I spoke with Mr. Cooper right before the board meeting started. He is currently out of the office, but he did give me a phone call since the executive committee meeting was today. Basically, he has held discussions with General Funk and about the new language that he wants to add to that records agreement that was approved back in June. That language has been provided to Deputy Chief Hagar, who was going to take it to the chief before the turnover happened. So that's caused a delay, but Deputy Chief Hagar should be meeting with Interim Chief Drake to to discuss the proposed language. And once Director Cooper is back in the office, he is going to put that at the top of his priority list to get that moving so that we can have something in place, hopefully by the August meeting.
Mr. Sweeney.
Yes, I've received an email over the weekend that was said that it was sent to other board members, but I didn't know whether it was sent to all other board members. That had to do with a supposed posting that was made by us favoring an Antifa site. And I was just wondering if Director Fitcher has any more information about the email. She was copied on it too, as to, you know, the background of this or what this is all about.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Let's pause for a moment. I just want to make sure before we move to a new comments, questions here on what Mr. Pinkley just updated us on. Now, thank you, Mr. Pinkley, here for the update on sharing that Mr. Cooper. And we'll just wait to hear the latest in our next meeting here. Director Fitcher, any update or anything related to this email? And as far as I can tell you, Chair, I did not receive that in a recipient of that email. But Director Fitcher, anything?
Yeah, so we a concerned community member saw that a community group had liked a post that someone had tweeted, and the community group liked a comment that the person was making. The community group liked the comment that someone was making regarding Antifa, and so they thought that it was in the MNCO or the COB who did that, and so they were concerned that we were. I don't know if it was in cahoots, or I don't know if there's a better word, that we were, you know, that was us. And so that was not us. And then they responded back, and I didn't, I got an email that said that they realized that that wasn't the right, you know, that they realized that that wasn't what they, I guess, initially saw. And so she said that it was contrived and not real. And so even less worthy of our attention and advocacy. And thank you for the attention and the communication. Have a great start to your week. So it was just some, you know, apparently some misunderstanding. And so.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Fitcher, to me, I'd like to review that myself. And Ms. Sweeney, thanks for raising it. There's certainly.
I just forwarded it to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. But certainly it seems to Director Fitcher's point here, certainly there's no association with MNCO, COB, and Antifa. We all are 11 individual members, but there's only one MNCO, and that is the mouth of the COB. So I have not had an opportunity to read through this. I won't offer any additional comments, but I will absolutely make it very clear if there was any affinity with MNCO, with Antifa, then there would be a vote on such, discussion on such, and that is not aligned directly to what we're talking about here. So welcome other members of the board here at Executive Committee for statements here, but I would prefer us to be on the side of just looking for more information, and it doesn't seem like there's much merit here either. But Mr. Sweeney, I see you raised.
No, I'm sorry, that answered my question. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. Additional comments, statements here, new business for the on the floor here? Okay. If not, is there a motion to?
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. And once.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Any focused discussion here? Those in favor, Mr. Campbell Gooch,
Aye.
Mr. Martinez,
Aye.
Mr. Sweeney.
Aye.
Thank you, and I vote aye as well. Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned at 5:40 p.m. Central. We will board as the entire board on Wednesday, August the 26th. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.